Well, then let's bring in another guest now who we're in fact originally supposed to speak to about a different issue, Dr. Ngqapheli Mchunu, joining us, a political analyst. Doctor, a very good evening to you. When we arranged for us to have a conversation this evening, we were meant to be having a conversation about the briefing held by the EFF leaders in Parliament, Dr. Ngqapheli and Mchunu. But now, the big political story of the moment is the passing of the former Deputy President, David Mabuza. I'll talk about the MKP issues in a moment. But first, how are you reflecting on who David Mabuza was in the politics of South Africa? Some are describing him as a hero this evening, others saying he was a villain in some stories.
A what?
I'm saying in some of the reflections this evening regarding David Mabuza, some of it has been mixed. People hailing him a hero, a patriot who was committed to the African National Congress, but others also saying he wasn't a hero in all stories, likening him to a villain. How would you situate or locate him in the broader legacy of politics in this country and who he was?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I think generally politicians are polarizing figures and they are bound to attract different opinions. What I can say from my observations is that he was obviously a politically shrewd operator, and he always played his cards very close to his chest. And he obviously ascended and ended up becoming deputy president of the country. All the other matters that are associated with his name, including obviously during his time as premier of Mpumalanga, is something that I cannot comment much on because nothing was ever confirmed to be true. But what we do know is that he did ascend in Nasrec 1 in 2017 and ended up becoming the deputy president of the country.
On to our scheduled conversation then, Dr. Mchunu, regarding the briefing today held by the Mkhonto Wesizwe parties, Dr. Ngqapheli and Mchunu. Dr. Ngqapheli saying, in fact, today that the party is not falling apart. How well do you think he and Mchunu managed to communicate given the recent troubles facing the MKP, especially in its parliamentary caucus?
Yes, thank you. I think they communicated as well as they could under the circumstances. However, there is nothing that they were going to say which was going to essentially cover up the challenges that the MK has been facing as a political party pretty much since post the elections. Or you could even argue before the elections with Mr. Khumalo and his contestation of the party leader position. However, the reality is that political parties of this nature tend to have these very same problems. You'll remember, of course, with COPE in 2008 and 2009 when they had performed quite well in 2009. However, by 2010, we were seeing legal cases pretty much every other week due to the contestation and the factionalism between the two leaders.
On that point then, how risky is it for the MKP to be experiencing such big issues so soon into its existence? Also, when you consider that ultimately, in the main, it's a party founded around one main personality, the former president Zuma.
Yes, absolutely. I think the point you mentioned regarding former President Zuma is the most important because he becomes somewhat of a trump card in the sense that come what may, for as long as he is still active, he will still be able to attract supporters and get voters to vote for him, particularly in his strong base of region of KZN and parts of Gauteng and Mpumalanga, as we saw in the elections last year. So for as long as former President Jacob Zuma is still active within the party, the MK will always have something to say or will always make a contribution,
right.
Yes, in our election.
What do you make, Dr. Mchunu, of Jacob Zuma's public silence on the rift in the organization? From the Floyd Shivambu debacle today, it was very clear that there's no love lost between John Ngqapheli, Mchunu, and Nhlamulo Ndlela, the national spokesperson. Why has he been so quiet, at least in public? And should he speak?
I think we all know that former President Zuma is, of course, a very shrewd political operator. he tends to do things his way and on his time. So one may argue that as leader, he may need to be more vocal. However, at the same time, I think what we are seeing now is there's just too many personalities within the party, but there isn't any ideological coherence in terms of what the party or what these leaders represent. So, but for former President Jacob Zuma, what is likely to happen is that when he comes out to speak, supporters of the MK party are likely to follow his cue. So he tends to sit back and allow everything to unfold. And then once he sees that the time is right, he will then speak. So remember, for example, how the party was launched on the 16th of December 2023. We saw that he kept it very quiet and he was silent. But upon launching the party, we saw more of him heading up to the elections.
In 30 seconds, if you can, how strong is the Hlophe-Makhubele alliance, and can it weather the factional winds that are headed its way?
The strength of the Makhubele and Dr. Hlophe faction will essentially depend on what does former President Zuma view to be the right way to proceed, because ultimately all the political leaders in the party, of course, do have an opinion and do have a say, but none of them hold the kind of sway that former President Zuma holds. So irrespective of whether or not they are calling for things to be done the right way, quote unquote, it all depends on what the senior or the elderly leadership of former President Zuma decides. And supporters and followers are likely to follow what the former president decides, more so over any other political figure.
Dr. Mchunu, really good to speak to you. Ngqapheli Mchunu, political analyst, talking to us about the latest Mkhonto we Sizwe party developments.